Today is what I think of as my Death in Venice video. I guess I was very struck by death for the first time, really, visiting Venice when there was a funeral, a hearse drawn by two black horses. You could see the casket through the glass of the hearse, which was very ornate, and on a cart, and the horses had purple cockades on their head that bounced along as they went, and I don't know, it's sort of, I'm not Catholic, I'm Protestant, but this sort of Mardi Gras, the carnival atmosphere, the incarnation, we are spirits incarnate, the whole human carnival, it put it in a different perspective. Protestants' death is very solemn, it's very undressed, it's people just being sad and saying good things about the person, but there was something so regal about that. The horse drawn and the cart, those little cockades, those on their heads. It made me see life in a different way, in a very theatrical way. I guess I am very theatrical to begin with. At any rate, this video is about the proof that I have of the afterlife. Now, I'm wearing the mask today, my most ornate Venetian mask, because this is a very scary video for me, believe it or not. I'm not really comfortable in the afterlife. I'm not really comfortable that spirits speak to me in dreams and sometimes in real life. I find it unbelievably terrifying, and when I finally accepted the fact that it was true, I really literally felt like crawling under my bed and just hiding for the rest of my life. It's not a very comfortable thought. See my little lace on it's pretty, isn't it? At any rate, it's not a very comfortable thought. It rocked my world. I lived in a world where, like everyone else, I was very average in the sense that I had average beliefs. I thought, like Voltaire, I see a watch, I know there's a watchmaker. I think I sort of felt that life was like that. You see the earth and you know that God or somebody made it, but I didn't feel that he was intimately involved every day, that you were in touch with him, that the spirits were right there with you all the time. You may think you're getting away with something, you're not. But this is going to be about the proof that I have, and it's interesting proof. You have to think about it a little bit in order to do it, but I'm wearing the mask because these are things that come from the world of the spirit, the other world. I think I've been halfway there, and they have told me things and shown me things. And the first part of the proof is what I wrote down after Tom passed away. This was before that I knew about his terrible problem that he had of being completely unfaithful all the time, was sort of in the grip of a sexual mania of sorts, where he had to constantly flatter women. He felt this was how he was going to achieve his identity. I think he'd been somehow he's so abused by his parents and even perhaps by his mother, and so he was quite a mess. But I never knew that. That was like he had two people. He really lived a life of two people. I knew nothing, and you will see that. Yes, you will see that. I wrote it down in this silly little folder because, of course, I really never, at the time that some of these things occurred, it never really dawned on me that there was a big, important reason that I had to begin to trust that the psychic world was speaking the truth to me, because the truth, brutal as it was going to come through. But at any rate, I was in Linden, Washington. I had my son and with me, and we were but actually the first two dreams were before. They were back in New Jersey right after he passed away, and I felt that somehow he had sent these two. They weren't dreams, actually, they were movies on TV. Two movies came on the very week after he died, and these were two movies that had always been favorite movies of mine. And Tom knew that, and I felt at the time that he sent them to me, but I never, it wasn't until later that I realized that the dreams were predictive. I mean, that these movies were actually sent to me because they were not only movies that I loved, showing that he was thinking of me. And I mean, I thought this stuff, but I didn't really actually believe it, I have to say. But it was so beyond coincidence that these two movies are not movies that are shown on TV all the time. And this was in 2009. The movies were The Ghost and Mrs. Muir. You can guess how that affected me. I mean, that the ghost, well, you've probably seen the movie, but what was significant in that movie and what was predictive, not only did she end up writing the story of the sea captain and the ghost who'd led a rather risque life, she also ended up leaving London and going to a small seaside town and living and writing this book. And that's exactly what happened to me. I ended up leaving New Jersey and going to a small seaside town up in the very northern part of Washington State. But at the time that I wrote this all down, I was in Washington State. I was in Linwood. We were staying in a motel that had kitchen facilities, and just trying to figure out where to live around Seattle. We were hoping to live around Seattle. It was really too expensive for us at the time, so that's how I ended up far north. But the two dreams were The Ghost of Mrs. Muir, as I said, where she ends up at a small seaside town writing the story, the rather risque story of this ghost who falls in love with her, and she falls in love with the ghost. And the second movie was Wuthering Heights, which has always been... I wrote a paper when I was in high school, which I will never forget. My teacher made a comment on it. We had to write this essay on, if you knew you were going blind, what would you do for the last 24 hours? And I said I would watch Wuthering Heights with Laurence Olivier. And so, Tom knew that. And the teacher commented, she said, "You must really like that movie." Well, yes, I did. But what's interesting about that movie is that the Kathy, who is his beloved, comes back and haunts him. But even more interesting, Kathy is two people. Heathcliff is the passion, and I have actually always identified with Heathcliff, I think, but I think everyone does. And he loves her passionately. She's wild and free. And then she has another person that marries her other side of herself while Heathcliff goes away to try to make money. She marries the David Niven character, who is very mild, and they live in a very conventional way. And so she has the very conventional side, and she has the sort of wild, passionate side. But the fact is that there are two Kathys in this movie. And when she dies, she finally confesses that she does really love Heathcliff, and she doesn't know why she rejected him, and he insists that she come back and haunt him. Well, in a way, I suppose Tom has come back and haunted me too. And so I have that all written down here. I have those dreams written in all innocence, knowing none of that at the time, but that very week that he died, and I felt those movies were sent. And then there was another movie which I wrote about in the book, Bedeviled, where I had the dream the night before, this very, very vivid dream, a lucid dream, about Tom appearing as a sort of in kind of lumberjack clothes with the dog under his arm, my dog, Wister, the Woo dog, and he was there, and then he finally, at the end of the dream, he gave me a very long, passionate kiss goodbye, but it was goodbye forever. And so I'd had the dream of that, and then the next day I'm vacuuming and cleaning up, getting ready to move out, get out of that apartment. And the Call of the Wild with Clark Gable comes on, and there he is wearing a kind of a lumberjack shirt with a dog under his arm, just like Tom had my dog Wister under his arm. And I thought, well, I better watch this movie. And of course he has a long, passionate kiss goodbye to her, because he's not going to stay married to her. She's married to someone else. And at the time, as I wrote there in Linwood, Washington in 2010, when we were just a few months after Tom had passed away, I thought it was just Tom saying goodbye to me and making sure that I saw that movie and knowing that he would like to have said goodbye to me like that. And there had been other dreams. I wrote about the bells ringing and my spirit at this party where Tom is there and I know he's dead and there are people there partying. And I keep going, why are all these people here? Why are they partying when you're dead? Don't they know you're dead? And of course, and I kept having this. Every time I'd wake up and I'd be so furious, and then I'd go to sleep and the doorbell would ring and more of the Guiding Light people would come in. Well, as it turns out, that very next day I was visiting with a friend of Tom's and mine from the Guiding Light, and I realized from that, I just began sort of talking about what did he think about the wake, or should we do a memorial service for Tom? This is just a few months after he died, and he said yes, and that many people from the Guiding Light had been calling about it. Of course, I was stunned to hear this. I hadn't heard from many of these people in 20 years. And of course it all worked out. It was, and I'm like, after this, I'm like, mental head slap, a party when you're dead is awake. And Tom was like ringing this bell, and I think bells ringing must have something to do with awakening your spiritual self. I mean, there are so many religions resort to bells ringing. And in this dream, the bell kept ringing. And I mean, I really didn't believe it at first that it had anything, but then as it turned out that these Guiding Light people, well, you can read in the book, it was all very shocking in a way, but I sort of went along with it. You do, these things happen and you think, well, it seems to be out of your control, so I went along with it. But subsequently, after the dreams, and of course I didn't realize at the time that there were two Toms as there were two Kathys in Wuthering Heights, or that as he said goodbye in The Call of the Wild, that there was another meaning, that there were several more meanings to that too, that in fact I was saying goodbye to the Tom that I had thought that I was married to. And it also turned out that when I got to this little seaside town of Bellingham, that was where they had filmed the movie Call of the Wild with Clark Gable and Loretta Young. They'd filmed it on Mount Baker, and they'd stayed in Bellingham, which is about 35 miles away from the lodge up there in Mount Baker, where it's always snowy, and so even in the summer they could film there, and it would look like winter and Hollywood. But they could take a train right up the coast, which was there at the time. So that was a big surprise, and that really sort of struck me. I thought, oh, wait a minute. It seems like they could see in time, he could see what was coming and knew I would be there and told me that movie for that reason with all those things, so I would know that he was there and looking at me. And of course, so at the time, I was just widowed. I had all kinds of financial confusions, and I was really terrified. And I had seen Pam Coronado on TV on Sensing Murder, and so I made an appointment and I called her.